Hey, it's Chris, League of Games. Today, we're going to be talking about Meeples and Monsters. Now, you'll notice, fancy, shiny Kickstarter edition. What do you need to know? Is it right for you? Was it worth it? AEG's latest crowdfunding campaign, everything you need to know, a little bit of how it plays, and then a little bit of thoughts on where I feel like I am after being able to have access to it and a copy of it. Let's do this. Now, full disclaimer, I actually went out and got a copy of this game. I traded for a copy of this game. I was not provided it, but I wanted to experience it because, as with many of these games, I followed the crowdfunding campaign, but I just couldn't pull the trigger for whatever reason. And so I finally ended up with a copy of it in my collection, and I said, you know what, I need to give this a shot. I need to see how this is coming from another game whose designer I really respect, and that is the game of Champions of Midgard. And so from that aspect, and from that comparison, as well as Lords of Waterdeep, this is your intro-level worker placement style game with a meeple bag building, a worker placement bag builder, if you will, in sort of a meeple bag building, a worker placement bag builder, essentially, if you will, where you are placing them down into town, building the town, defending the town from said monster attacks until the final villains arrive and you are forced to make your last stand before the game ends in order to earn the most victory points. All in a nutshell. Let me show you some of the content. Let me show you some of the actual physical gameplay, and then let's talk about it a little bit further. So here's just a basic overview setup of what Meeples and Monsters looks like on the board when you have a little bit of the stuff out there, but not too overcrowding, to give you an example of just kind of what it's going to look like near the beginning of the game. You have your monsters that are drawn that get set up in the district according to where they go. They tell you how many victory points they have. They tell you what bonus you may need to get after you defeat them. And then they also tell you how many hit points they take in order to kill them when you send your heroes there in order to defeat them. Speaking of your heroes, you have at your disposal one of the 4 basic types of heroes that you're going to be getting, your meeples essentially, into your bag, as this is sort of a meeple bag builder. So what you're doing is you're taking said meeples, depending on what round of the game it is, depending on how far along you are, anywhere from 4 to 6, and as you draw them and you place them, you have the ability then at the beginning to potentially build using this mechanism at the first phase of the game. But then if you choose not to build, and building is from one of these building tiles, a la sort of your Lords of Waterdeep, where you're building this, putting it down in one of these various spots that are available in the various districts, and potentially getting the benefit of an extra red meeple, an extra yellow meeple, or getting 2 quest cards and discarding 1 because the quest cards are going to give you additional victory points. And then you place it down there, and that becomes a new worker placement spot in that area. This becomes a new worker placement spot in this area. And then you can not only use the 4 basic in the middle, but you have the option to interact with these spots as well. And they're always going to be available to you because on your turn, when you are placing your worker placements wherever you want in that manner, right? Well, obviously I couldn't do this. That's a black and a peasant. So then wherever you want to place them afterwards, I know this is not completely legal placement, after your turn is done, you gather them all back up. They go in your lodgings to show that you've used them. You draw new meeples that go into your tavern, and we'll show you what the board looks like here just so you can have an idea. So basically what you're doing is you draw them here, they get placed here, you put them out onto this map, then as they go into here, this is your used section. When you can't draw anymore, you take everything from here and put it back into said bag to redraw. These are the 5 heroes that you'll be dealing with, well, 4 plus the peasants, which are really just your basic ones, and you get to upgrade them essentially if we just lay this over here for a second. And as you upgrade them as one of your actions, you get a card that gets to be able to be put on here that either gives them a special ability, or in this case, the level 2 for the warrior now does 2 combat damage against the monster. Flip it over, and it not only does 2, but it has an ability here. The first time you assign a warrior to the monster, you can also assign a peasant from your lodgings to the same monster. And you can see that they also do 1 damage, so you're automatically getting 3 there for the price of 1. And that's from their lodgings, so that's the used area, which is good. And then it includes a couple special heroes at your disposal as well, including the shaman, which is a special one you're going to be recruiting from one of the buildings, as well as rangers. And then you have your paladins, which are coming at various levels. You can see here that the shaman is only a level 3. The archer or the ranger here is only a level 2 and the paladin is only a level 1, but there's a reason for that because they don't get upgraded any further from that aspect. So you're assigning those workers, you're upgrading those workers, and you're placing them however you want. And that is the basic gist of the game. You assign them potentially to monsters over here as you battle them. You can see that all of them have little spaces that you can assign them here. And then if you defeat them, you take the card and you use it for your scoring purposes. At the end of the round, you draw monsters up to the number of monsters that you beat that round, and they go to whatever area that they're placed in. And as you go through this deck, you get to points where the Dark Council arrives, and the Dark Council is represented over here on the player board as additional monsters that are available to fight at the end of the game. I mean, what game wouldn't be complete without not only a dragon, a gelatinous cube that's made of wood, as well as a giant freaking beaver. Obviously, again, they give different bonuses here. These bonuses, in this case, actually mean that your cleric here does 1 extra damage permanently throughout the rest of the game, not that you get an extra cleric. It's a little bit confusing at times. And then there's also potentially set collections, because it goes back to those quests that I mentioned, quests that you will be drawing and able to obtain that you can use throughout the game for whatever it may be. In this case, if you complete this objective of having 5 clerics, you get 4 points at the end of the game, but if you don't, you lose a point. So another way sort of interacting there as well. The last point that I'm going to make here as well is when you're upgrading, say, heroes in this sense, in order to upgrade them, you actually have to spend victory points in order to upgrade them. So if you want to upgrade here the mage to a level 2, you actually have to spend a victory point. If you want to upgrade to a level 3, you have to spend another victory point. You can sign a worker here. It's going to upgrade your cleric for free to level 2, but it's going to cost you 3 victory points to get it to level 3, and so on and so forth. Having seen what it entails now, I like the bag building aspect. I am a big fan of that element regardless. I love being able to participate in a game that uses that as a mechanic. However, at the same time, it has to be done in a relatively intuitive and clever way, and I think it works for this game. The biggest concern I had when I read the rulebook, when I watched Rado's playthrough on the actual campaign page, which led me to not back it in the first place and instead trade, was the lack of actual meaningful interaction in this game. And I think that is what is going to be either a boon or a curse, depending on how you feel about these types of worker placement Euro style games in the first place. As you saw me mention, or in case you did not watch that portion of the video, after you place all of your workers, your meeples, down onto whatever location of the board you want, in whatever numbers you want, you take them all off. And then the board is blank, essentially, for the next person to go. And so the tension of not being able to go where you want to is sort of lost in that sense. Now, as you may have noticed, a lot of the spots, though, require certain types of heroes or certain numbers. And so the tension is there more from that aspect. And traditionally, when I hear people playing worker placement, when I see people talking about that, that is the big element that they like, for the most part. They like the unavailability of access. And that's a weird thing to say, but that's really where the strategy comes in, is when do I go for what I need versus when somebody else needs it. And for someone like myself, who typically deals with chaos and dice and a Merathrash, I thrive on interaction. And so for me personally, the lack of interaction in this game is a detriment. I would prefer some sort of more interaction that's just not physically available with how the game is played. This isn't one of those games where they say there's no interaction when it's actually indirect action and, I choose this and you don't have access to it. The only really thing that works with that is the room tiles. And even then, that's about it. I mean, I guess you could maybe say that the monsters, if you really are looking for a bonus that's on a monster, but otherwise the vast majority of the worker placement on these tiles, because even if someone else steals this tile, all they're doing is building this tile for you, so you're still going to have access to it on your turn. So it's not really that much of a direct or indirect interaction that you're losing. I hesitate to say that there's none, but there is minimal at best. The highlight of the gameplay, without a doubt, are these unique specialization heroes. They offer a different spice, a different variety, and a different flavor than the other 4 plus peasants that you're going to be dealing with. Because frankly, I found the regular ones, even at the upgraded levels, sometimes are rather lackluster. And I say that in a way that I just not sure how else to describe. I think of Lords of Waterdeep, I think of Champions of Midgard, and I think of the variety of spice that you're getting, especially when you include the expansions, of how different things go. And I just didn't feel like that was there when I'm looking at these guys, because they're going to upgrade in the same way. And the only difference is maybe there's a limited amount of some of the specialization ones, so you necessarily can't get them if you're too late to the party, which is frankly disappointing if you're not able to get the coolest ones in the game and you're stuck with just the basic ones. Because it's not like, well, in this game we include 4, and this game we include 4 of the total 8, and just something else from that aspect would have been nice, because it just feels rather samey after a few plays. The whole upgraded screen-printed meeples, that was the enticement of the Kickstarter edition, while including the Towers expansion. And the Towers expansion is actually really nice. I like the Towers expansion. I think it gives it some more of that variety and that spice and that little bit of something extra that otherwise I think the base game is lacking. But the other reason that people got it was the screen-printed meeples, and I guess I'm just one of those people that doesn't really find a whole lot of value in these. It was more at times, especially when they're laying face down on the mat, or they're laying face up, I should say, so you can only see the screen print. It's almost a little bit harder to remember what they are, and I didn't feel like it added a whole lot of value from that aspect. If I didn't have these on this edition, I wouldn't even know what I was missing. It's not an element of that where you have something like Bullet and, you know, you've got the cardboard discs versus the nice wooden discs pulling it out of the bag, and or Quacks of Quedlinburg, where it's really, it just, no, doesn't do anything. Another pro is that you can teach this game to pretty much anyone. It's in line with the weight or the complexity of those other two games, of Lords of Waterdeep, of Champions of Midgard, and so the simplicity comes from that aspect of the accessibility. The con is that, as I mentioned, you're going through this deck of monsters, and settled throughout the deck randomly, pandemic style-esque, are these Dark Council cards that will arrive eventually, because you break it into like quarters or fifths, and you put one in each, and you shuffle it and you stack them, right? And so it might come at the beginning of that section, it might come at the end of the section. Well, the last one comes, and then you have 2 more turns, and then the game's over. But the problem is, this game can stall considerably depending on how it's played. And that is probably the biggest criticism that I will levy at this game, in the sense that it just felt like at times it dragged. Because if you don't choose to attack the monsters to get victory points, and you want to upgrade, upgrade, and other people aren't forcing the issue on the monsters, this game could take easily 1.5 or longer times to play than it realistically should, because there is no forcing it. The monsters killed is the timer of this game in general, and if you don't push the envelope, if someone in your table does not do that, then you're not going to be getting anywhere anytime soon, and you're going to end up with a lot of guys, a lot of upgrades, and then eventually you'll get through it, but you might get a little bit bogged down or bored along the way. But you could easily get a little bit waylaid doing those things, and this is a game where I can easily see it overstaying its welcome if you have a group that tends to do more of that. Don't get me wrong, this is not a bad game. This is a game that gives you what you think it is. And take that for what you will. It's not offering me a lot of surprise. It's not offering me a lot of wah moments. It's just straightforward. It's simplicity in general, in terms of what you see is what you get. And for some people, that's going to be more than enough, especially as an entry point. For other people like myself, I didn't really feel satisfied overall from the experience. It was fine. I'm happy to have tried it, but I don't feel the need to necessarily go back to it anymore at this point, even though the expansion does make it better, just like the other 2 games, Lords of Waterdeep and Champions of Midgard. But at the same time, it doesn't make me go, wow, this took an okay game and made it a super good game. It made it, okay, I'm more interested, it was more entertaining, but still nothing that made me go, wow, right? And with all of the games that are out there, with all of the games that I have, I'm not looking for good games anymore. I'm looking for games that wow me. And for that reason, along with just something I just can't quite put my finger on in terms of the missing element, whether it's more player interaction, whether it's more variability in the heroes, or anything else. It just sort of left me feeling lackluster. But I say this as a non-worker placement person, so take that with a grain of salt. But with those other games that I mentioned, there is a set, defined time frame that allows you to figure out what you need to do in what time and how pressed you're going to be making those decisions, making them more meaningful, and putting the pressure on you in a good way. And this, I think, just lacks that tension overall for me, as someone who does not normally like that, but is needed in a game like this in the first place. All in all, there you go. Those are my thoughts on Meeples and Monsters. Let me know what you think. Have you played it? How do you feel about it? How wrong am I? You can tell me in the comment section down below. It was an interesting game. I'm happy to have played it. Don't get me wrong about this. But now I know that this one is also not for me, and I'm okay with that. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for putting up with me. Thumb the video. It helps YouTube tell other people that what I'm putting out there is going to be helpful for them as well. And just, again, thank you for watching in the first place. Stay classy. Have a great day.